That's who you talk about.
Anything going tonight? When is that? Is it on? Oh, next one. Well, I figure I'm gonna be doing some questions. If they're gonna be some public grandstands. Oh, it's mine, her spot? Oh, cool.
I don't know why I'm over here.
Normally I just sit next to you on the days that I'm here, but because she has her official nameplate up there tonight. I can do the whole thing if you'd like me to.
Do you want me to change?
Technically, my name is not on the actual executive summary, but I'm happy to do whatever I need. I can if you want me to. Yeah, I mean, the first half of the presentation is exactly what I did in my road shows. And that way I can go up there and then you can answer any questions. You can chime in from your microphone then. That's why they gave it to you. If you want me to run the whole thing, I can. Huh?
I now call this regular meeting of the Committee of the Whole to order at 5:30. Please call the roll.
Ms. Pearson,
Present.
Mr. Schubert,
Here.
Ms. McCall,
Present.
Ms. Bennett,
Here.
Mr. Carpenter,
Here.
Ms. Haley,
Here.
Ms. Stanford.
Here.
With 7 present, we have a quorum.
We'll now take a moment of silence, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
As we start each board meeting, it bears reminding that the mission of Rockford Public Schools is to collaboratively engage all students in an equitable first-class education for a changing world. Before going any further, I want to thank Ms. Kim Pedersen and Aaron Hill, who are working behind the scenes to produce the board's broadcast via YouTube live stream and Comcast Channel 20. We are now on the regular portion of the meeting. Are there any changes, corrections, or additions to the meeting minutes? If not, they will be accepted as submitted. Thank you, Ms. Stanford, or Ms. Haley will lead the stakeholder committee at this time.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, let's start by showing our 12-month agenda and our future presentations. We will not have a presentation this month. Instead, we will have 2 presentations next month. We want to remind board members of the opportunities available to interact with our students, families, and community each month. Please make sure you check the board calendar on rps205.com on a regular basis for the most up-to-date information. Now let's take a look at the good things happening in the district. Auburn High School hosted a military fair for all RPS 205 high school juniors and seniors. Students met with representatives from military branches who talked with students about what they do, careers that exist in their branches, expectations, and more. Kennedy Middle School's new Beta Club chapter, led by Mrs. DeFrancesca and a group of dedicated 7th graders, kicked off with a Valentine's card project for residents at a local nursing home. The district's FACE department visited to thank them for their dedication to service. Congratulations to the Eisenhower Montessori Girls Swim Team and the Marshall West Boys Swim Team on their first place finish in the Rock River Athletic Conference. Thank you to Jefferson High School, who hosted another awesome season-ending meet for our middle school swimmers. Thanks to their amazing teachers, kindergartners at Johnson and Brookview Elementary Schools are spreading love with hearts around the world. They've been collecting Valentines from over 50 states and beyond. Johnson even received a special Valentine from RPS graduate and Miami Dolphins player Rob Jones. Brookview students and staff were given stuffed toy lobsters all the way from Maine. Next up is a couple items of note with our community partners. Motivating the next generation, State Representative Maurice West, Alderwoman Gabrielle Turina, and Rockford Promise Scholars inspired Risa middle schoolers with stories about the transformative power of education and the opportunities Rockford Promise creates by attending college tuition-free. RPS 205 high school students recently had the unique opportunity to shadow local professionals as part of the Business Academy, gaining firsthand experience in various career fields. Through this initiative, students explored daily workplace responsibilities across multiple industries, immersing themselves in real-world scenarios that provided valuable insights and inspiration for their future careers. On our latest 205 Vibe, Auburn senior Calvin McGee was nominated for the ICERI Outstanding Student Award. Despite facing profound loss and challenges, Calvin has risen above with strength and determination. Read all about his incredible journey on our 205 Vibe. And now it's time for legislative news. We're holding our legislative luncheon with local lawmakers on Monday, March 17th at Haskell. We're excited to showcase Haskell's recent successes and discuss how we can work together to continue strengthening public education in Rockford. The luncheon will feature engaging discussions on key initiatives and student achievements, a Q&A panel with school leaders and stakeholders, a guided school tour led by student ambassadors. The RPS board members and student ambassadors are helping shape the agenda to ensure meaningful conversations with you and fellow policymakers. Our agenda for the legislative luncheon will focus on priorities that our board came up with at our recent retreats. We address those that are at a local, state, and federal level. Dr. Jarrett, is there anything you'd like to add to our legislative priorities?
My last update really is the only update that I have regarding any of these 10 priorities at this moment. We're getting ready to really bump things up, and I'm hoping we can build momentum on the 17th. But I do, again, want to highlight that we've been working very closely with associations and districts from across the state around the TRS penalty issue. And I am optimistic that that is something that is going to be heard. We have, again, our local legislator, Dave Vella, has brought some legislation forth on that, and that could be $1.3 million in savings, potentially for RPS. Of the nearly $10 million in TRS penalties, Rockford Public Schools does pay the largest penalty amount in the state of Illinois right now. So this is a huge opportunity for us to take those penalty dollars and put them back into the classroom. So I think to just clarify for folks that are interested in this issue, the reason RPS is disproportionately paying these penalties is in a teacher shortage. We have many folks that in the end years of their career, which is what pensions are based on, end up taking an extra assignment. We also had all of our elementary teachers do an extra assignment for the most part. 17 of our 21 schools opted in. So we had a huge population of teachers who worked more, getting a 20% increase, which is what happens when you work an extra class period. So as a result, the state's cap on a 6% increase meant that a huge percentage of our teachers were, despite just those teachers filling a need in their school, were adding penalties to our district whenever they retire, because this is any time in the last 10 years of their teaching their top 4 years of salary. So there's a huge number of teachers that could trigger these penalties. So this is likely to be an ongoing issue. So that is why we've really identified this as a top priority. And really, it is not due to bad management with the Rockford Public Schools or with our teachers or our local principals. It's due to meet the needs of our students coming out of the pandemic with the 6th period, with the extra time we added with our elementary schedule. And it's also because in many, many cases, we want to make sure there's a certified teacher in front of our children in our secondary schools, and folks are taking a 6th assignment on, which may or may not be triggering penalties depending on where they are in their career. And finally, people may ask, well, why didn't you just ask them if they're getting ready to retire? Well, that would be illegal. We can't force that conversation with folks and say, well, you can't have a 6th assignment because you're in the last 4 years of your. The way other districts get around this is they often do look at guaranteed 6% increases, but even that has been ruled to be, with some recent legal challenges, I'm not even sure that is legal anymore. In fact, I believe Attorney Holdley has shared that with me. So there aren't any easy solutions here short of a legislative fix. I spoke directly with someone from TRS who is willing to address this issue, as well as just some really outstanding partnership from Representative Vella on this issue. And he's very much understands the issue and is willing to put legislation forth. So I do hope to continue to update the board on that, as well as many of the other priorities will gain steam on as we get into the legislative session. So thank you for the opportunity.
Sure, thank you. Do any board members have anything to share regarding any school events you've attended or any interactions you've had in the community? Ms. Haley?
I just want to say that a few of us attended the Kishwaukee Division Legislative meeting last week, and one thing of note that I do want to mention is that the resolutions have come out. So those are, as a board, we're able to review those, and I think we have until June to oppose or to support, or either put any other new resolutions up for vote for at the IASB in November. But overall, it was a good meeting and very well attended.
Ms. McCall?
I just want to piggyback on what Mrs. Haley had mentioned about attending the Kishwaukee meeting. It was very, very informative. I walked away with a lot of good ideas. I want to congratulate all of the fall sports, or is it spring? What do you call it? Is it spring sports? Like basketball and stuff? Winter. Hey, all the winter sport. Winter sports. I apologize. I enjoyed going to as many games and interacting with as many students as I could, and they always love it. And again, I always put out there, if you guys have any events that you want me to attend, please let me know, and if my schedule allows, I will be there. And then on one other note, I just wanted the audience or the participants just to give us a little grace. Last meeting, I had a couple of M&Ms and somebody thought I was eating on the floor. So I just wanted to make sure that that, sometimes we are coming straight from work, and, if we might have a mint or something like that, but we're not back here eating full meals or anything. And if anybody has any other thing, contact me directly, and we can talk about it. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Thank you. Oh. So first of all, I want to thank the board members for being so engaged for the Kishwaukee divisional meeting. We have attended previous ones. It was easier in terms of, and just having it in Rockford made the difference for me. So I certainly appreciate Illinois Association of School Board for doing that. Also, I want to, because I keep forgetting, I want to pause to acknowledge, because we frequently make sure that we communicate with Superintendent Aaron Jarrett when we have a problem with the principal. And I think that when we have an opportunity to celebrate our principals and acknowledge them, we should do so. So the Westview principal, Ms. Sarah Craig, have gone above and beyond to improve student attendance. It kind of took me back to my childhood when neighbors looked out for each other, and she made a connection with parents whose children were in walking distance, but transported their kids to school to get them connected with another family to help them in their attendance. And so I really appreciate Ms. Craig for going above and beyond. Everyone know that transportation is a major issue in our district, and just doing that critical thinking and being creative in thinking to make that connection speaks a lot of her. Also, Conklin principal, Mr. Brad Smith, and his team, there was a medical emergency at their school with one of their staff members, and they immediately went into action. So that I want to acknowledge Mr. Smith, Nurse Deb Dunlap, first grade teacher, and I'm sorry if I mispronounced his name, Miguel Maladolo, for jumping right in and shielding and making sure that the kids didn't see it, and the ambulance was there within seconds. And when the staff member returned, she reports that they welcomed her with open arms, and it speaks volume to the morale at Conklin and looking out for each other. So I want to acknowledge the entire team at Conklin for being so committed and looking out for each other. So that's what I have for the acknowledgments. That's all I have. Thank you.
Anyone else? Mr. Carpenter.
Thank you. I also went to the Kishwaukee divisional meeting, and it was informative and well attended. And one of the sessions was on community engagement, and one of the schools in our area presented on that topic. And it was, it's a pretty big district. And I left thinking, or they went through all the things that they do to engage their community, and that was all very nice and helpful. And I thought, well, geez, that's what RPS does on a weekly basis. So I know it's a moving target and there's always work to do, but I think that I would just congratulate RPS on their community engagement. And a lot of it comes from administration, but a lot of it is individual schools that engage with their community. And I think that we should recognize that as much as we can. A couple other things. I went to the Guilford Valkyries performance last weekend, which was enjoyable, and I know that at least one of our student advisory committees members is on Valkyries, and that was enjoyable. I also had a visit at Fairview Early Childhood Center this month, and had a nice conversation with Principal Darcy Dunn, who's doing a good job, and talked about their successes and some things that they could use some help with. And also attending the Student Code of Conduct listening session, which, it was winter and weather was rough, and hopefully we'll have more people in future Student Code of Conduct listening sessions next year. But I appreciate all the work that went into setting that up. There was a ton of work. This was at East, and so they had, and I don't know if they did at the other ones, but language interpreters, they had 8 or 10 language interpreters there, and it was really nice that they went through all that work to get that set up. So thank you all. That's all. Thanks.
Go ahead, Mrs. Bennett.
Okay, so I have been able to visit quite a few different schools, so thank you to Dr. Gallagher for arranging all of those for me to do that. Very much appreciated. Just hearing principals talk about their building, it's just like so invigorating of how proud they are and how excited they are to share different things that are going on, and then also just to like be with students for any amount of time is lovely. Also have spent a significant amount of time at Eisenhower and working with their staff and admin. So just kind of a shout out or whatever to call it for everybody at RPS, everybody in the community, all of the different supports and resources that are going into that building to support the 1,000 students that attend there and all of the staff who work there. Thank you very much for supporting a very hurting building, and I just really appreciate it. So.
That'll conclude our report.
Thank you very much. Mr. Carpenter will now lead the Performance and Monitoring Committee, or Ms. Bennett.
Thank you. Tonight, the Performance and Monitoring Committee has two presentations. The first is, I think, from Jen Lawrence on the Student Code of Conduct revisions for this year. And Mr. David Graffey, thank you.
Also, all board members also have a draft copy as well for your reference if needed.
Good evening, members of the board and anybody following along at home on our YouTube channel. My name is David Graffey, and I am the Director of Student Services. I'm here tonight to present proposals to the Student Code of Conduct changes for the 25-26 school year. Today we're going to start off with an overview of the Student Code of Conduct. There is a lot of time and effort, as Mr. Carpenter said, that goes into these proposed changes each and every year. On the slide in front of you is our annual revision process. It consists of obtaining feedback from various stakeholder groups, meeting with a proposal group of administrators from Rockford Public Schools, and then, as Mr. Carpenter mentioned, having community listening sessions at both Auburn and East High Schools, where we present our proposed changes to the community in advance of the meeting that we are having here this evening. So what is our Code of Conduct and what is it not? So believe it or not, the Code of Conduct is actually not an attempt to consolidate all student misbehavior into one document. For example, there are many things that occur in our classrooms on a daily basis that our teachers are able to address through Tier 1 methods without needing to resort to the Student Code of Conduct to address the student misbehavior. The Student Code of Conduct is designed for all of our students and is intended to simplify rules and put families on notice for potential consequences students could face should they not meet those expectations. Our current Code of Conduct is broken up into 5 discipline matrices, which you can see on the screen in front of you. These 5 matrices have been in effect since the beginning of the 22-23 school year and help us group similar types of behaviors together to make it easier for stakeholders when trying to identify specific behavior violations within the Code of Conduct. These are the only colored pages within the Code of Conduct and make it easier for our stakeholders to find should they need to look up these various violations. Within each of those 5 behavior categories or matrices, we have 4 egregiousness levels or seriousness levels of violations. For each of those 4 levels of violations, we have recommended interventions, which are done with our MTSS teams to support students in reteaching behavior expectations or skills. And then we also have consequences or punitive actions that our administrators can assign as a response to student misbehavior. A lot of the guide rails that are put on us as far as a school district for how we can correct student misbehavior is due to Senate Bill 100, which has been in place for about a decade now. The biggest part that came out of Senate Bill 100 is that school districts are not allowed to utilize zero tolerance policies. What that means for us as a school district is that we cannot have an if this, then that type of corrective system for addressing student misbehavior. What that means is if a student completes conducts a violation of the Code of Conduct, we cannot have a mandatory response to that student's misbehavior. The one exception to this policy, according to Illinois School Code, is for weapons violations. Anytime a student possesses or uses a weapon at one of our school sites or on a school-sponsored activity, we are mandated by the Illinois School Code to bring that before the school board as a mandatory recommendation for expulsion. This covers firearms, knives, billy clubs or nightsticks, brass knuckles or knuckle weaponry, or any other object used or threatened to be used as a weapon. When our administrators assign corrective actions, they must consider 5 factors which are on the screen in front of you. This ensures that each student as a whole is considered when determining what actions are appropriate to address that student's misbehavior. Our current code of conduct increases for consequences by 2 different methods. Number 1 is for students who continue to violate the code of conduct for multiple violations of the same type, whereas other codes can escalate or increase in seriousness based on how serious that incident was. So for example, a student who commits a more serious incident could expect to see a harsher consequence for that type of violation than for a lower level violation. On the screen in front of you is a sample matrix or progression of potential corrective actions that can be assigned for students. Again, this is not a checklist that administrators must follow. So for example, you don't have to do level 1 before moving on to step 2. This is more of a continuum of options that are available to our administrators that are bound by various egregiousness levels as indicated on a previous slide. As previously discussed, in the top left corner, our least intensive response is classroom level interventions that are done with the teacher without the need to refer to the student code of conduct for discipline. And on the bottom right-hand corner is our most highly intensive response of mandatory recommendation for expulsion, as previously indicated for weapons violations. In order to obtain feedback to propose changes with all of you this evening, I've conducted several different stakeholder feedback groups. In previous years, we've relied on anonymous surveys shared with our staff and our administrators to obtain this feedback. And we continue to implement that this year as well, as I do think it's important for staff to be able to share their feedback anonymously, as not everybody feels comfortable sharing in front of a group in a public forum such as this. In addition to that anonymous surveys that were out there for all of our staff, I also went to all 37 of our K-12 schools and listened to feedback from various staff groups. This consisted of all staff, MTSS teams, leadership teams, school improvement teams, and that was at the discretion of the building principal of the school that I visited. The feedback that I received there was not only relevant to code of conduct changes at the district as a whole, but also helped me identify what specific needs that individual building may have so that my department can better support the things that are happening at those buildings. In addition, I met with my parent advisory group on the student code of conduct, which meets monthly, and we had 6 different meetings where we discussed proposed changes to the code of conduct, looked at discipline data to ensure an equitable enforcement of the code within the district, and ultimately make proposed changes for tonight's meeting. Lastly, as Mr. Carpenter mentioned earlier, we had 2 community listening sessions, one at Auburn High School and one at East High School. Again, due to some weather constraints and those kind of things this year, the attendance was rather low. So again, we will encourage people to continue to come out for next year's rendition of that as well. But I would like to thank our communications team for helping us get the word out, as I think that was very adequately presented to the community. I just think that some of the weather constraints is what caused a little bit of the lower attendance for those. What did we hear through all of these feedback loops? The 4 main things that I heard through all of these various stakeholder groups are on the screen in front of you. Number 1, at our secondary schools, so our middle schools and high schools, one of the main things that I heard no matter where I went was that drugs, specifically vaping, is a large growing concern for our schools. In speaking with students individually, some students, and again, I want to reiterate that the vast majority of our students within RPS follow the code of conduct and don't receive discipline referrals, or if they do, they're very low disciplinary referrals. Students that otherwise follow the school code of conduct and are at school for the right reasons are afraid to use restrooms these days for fear of being involved in whatever other activities are going on there, whether that be fights that are occurring in our bathrooms or drug use with multiple students vaping in a stall.
Students that do follow the code of conduct are afraid to go into the bathroom during the school day for fear of being roped into those activities and being as part of that investigation. I'm hearing similar conversation from staff as well, that it's being disruptive to their environment and trying to cause students to go to the opposite side of the school to use a restroom that they feel safe using, taking those students out of class for an extended period of time. So again, this was something that we wanted to address with proposed changes, which we will review tonight. Another item that I heard across all stakeholder groups at these various listening sessions was that physically aggressive behaviors continue to be a problem within our schools. This can be reckless behavior at the hands of one student that are doing potentially dangerous things within our schools, or this could be physically aggressive behaviors where multiple students are engaged in fighting type behaviors. And we wanted to make sure that we could adequately address those concerns tonight as well. A third issue that came up in most of the buildings was a concern for students that repeatedly violate the code of conduct at lower levels. So our level 1 and level 2 violations, where maybe they aren't triggering level 3 and level 4s, which can potentially lead to some higher level corrective actions through interventions and potentially outplacement at some of our alternative learning options. And then lastly, some of the things that we heard was schools that wanted to look at us continuing to expand on our alternative learning options for the students that our typical K-12 buildings are just not able to meet the supports that those students need. So that takes us into our proposed changes tonight. On this slide here, you could see what the major proposed change is for each of the various discipline matrices or categories. And we will go into each of these in more detail on the following slides, where we will look specifically at the red line data. As previously stated, you all have the red line in front of you. So again, if you would like to follow along, please let me know. I will be stopping at the end of each individual slide to field questions for that specific slide before moving on to the next one, as I know this is going to be the meat and potatoes of our presentation tonight. So first, this slide here looks at proposed changes to the non-discipline matrices. The vast majority of the changes listed on this slide are due to legislative changes. So again, we are trying to accommodate those legislative changes to ensure that we are in compliance with all Illinois statutes and standards. So again, I will give you a few minutes to read through the proposed changes here on this slide and read through the red line redactions and field any questions regarding this slide.
Mr. Murphy, I have a quick question.
Absolutely.
Well,
Board President Pearson.
Thank you. In regards to bullying, I know that there were bullying forms that parents or students could report and be filed. So that is on record. And I just want to ask or confirm that each school have those forms and it's been communicated to families that that is something that they complete. Secondly, there's also a form, an advocate form, and I'm not sure if every school have that form either for anyone that the family choose to be an advocate for the student, to be a part. Recently, a situation came up at one of the high schools, and they kind of struggled to find the appropriate document. So in support of student behavior improvement, I think as families attempt to kind of build a team to help them in that area, that we have the necessary documents and it is well communicated to families that we have such things in place.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
And I will go into more detail on bullying on the next slide as well. Any other questions or comments on this slide here? All right, seeing none, I'll move on to the bullying slide that Board President Pearson was just addressing. So to answer some of the questions that Board President Pearson posed on the previous slide, we do have specific bullying investigation forms that are available in each of our schools and will be available in any office should a parent or student wish to fill out that form. They can also report that to any administrator, teacher, mental health professional, any adult that works in our buildings can receive a complaint of bullying from any student or parent, and then they can bring that information to the necessary administrator to conduct the investigation. Our process is very solid with how we handle bullying investigations. There's the initial reporting form where our administrators gather the original who, what, when, where, and why. There is a series of interview questions that the administrator will go with as they interview students to ensure that we have consistency with our process. And then we have a very robust reporting system, both in how we address the families with the outcomes and how we are supporting their students after the fact, and then as well as how we report that information to the state. So again, that is a very well-defined process that we have in the district. And if you are aware of any specific buildings that are struggling, I would be happy to reach out in a supportive role on that behalf as well. And then as far as the advocate forms, that's something that I'm not overly familiar with. Jenna, are you aware of anything with advocate forms?
No, maybe we can touch base offline to gain a better understanding.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So again, did I adequately address your question?
You did, thank you.
Perfect, thank you. So as far as the proposed changes that we have for the bullying matrices for this school year, as you read through the definitions, and again, I'm not going to bore everybody here by reading them off the slide, but you could see that the vast majority of the changes that are here are to allow our administrators to be able to address situations at the severity level that need to ensure that our schools can remain safe and orderly places for our students to attend. So again, the vast majority of the changes here are going to be increasing language to include severe and persistent type language. So again, I'll have everybody have a few moments to read through that, and I do see one light on. So Ms. McCall? Yes,
thank you. In reference to the bullying, and you guys say you have a solid plan, action plan of how it's being attacked. Is there any data that kind of tells what the outcomes are? What's the likelihood of, say this kid is a bully and they've gone through everything you've mentioned, but they continue to bully, like what is is there any data that supports that incident was over and never came back, or was it reoccurring? What happened, with the victim of the bullying, the perpetrator? Like, or do you have any data like that we can kind of analyze to see if everything we're implementing is actually, working?
Absolutely. So as previously mentioned, our code escalates in two different ways. So one way that we can analyze the data that you're requesting is by looking at students that have repeated bullying incidents. So for example, a first-time offense could start at a bullying level 2. So if we looked at violations, of course, across the year for violations of level 3 and level 4, that would indicate to us that students continued to reoffend after the first interaction and the first interventions that were put in place. I would be happy to pull that data and have Dr. Jarrett share it with you guys all through a superintendent's update.
And just one additional thing too. Is it broken? So you're able to pull that data by school, so we can see if a certain school has a high propensity to bullying over another school. So if you have something like that, it'd be great to look at.
I'd be happy to get that to you.
Thank you.
All of this information is documented in Panorama, correct?
Yes. So all code violations, as well as interventions or corrective actions that are assigned, are available in Panorama, which for those that are following along that aren't familiar with Panorama is how we document our interventions for the school district. So there's a couple different things that filter into that. And one aspect of Panorama is that anybody who interacts with that student at the school, whether that be a classroom teacher, a support staff personnel, can look at what interventions that student has and could be part of that student's plan champion or part of their team. And so again, that helps us get multiple sets of eyes on a student and be able to meet them where their needs are. Thank you. Absolutely. Yep, Ms. Bennett?
I have just a few questions. So on page 8, okay, so for example, so for interventions, there's restorative conferencing, so circles, like peace circles or circles in general. There's also, sorry, I just lost it. It's on here, peer mediation somewhere, but I can't figure. Oh, right above it. Yeah, literally. Okay, so peer mediation. So for both of those, for example, for being an intervention, for the individual who was bullied, they would obviously need to consent to doing something like that, right? It would be an intervention, not a, like, this is the automatic response, but this is an option to the individual should they be interested in that, correct?
That's correct. So any type of peer mediation would need to have mutual agreement by both parties to sit down and engage in that type of corrective action. We would never force somebody into a room with somebody who had potentially been abusive towards them, as we would not want to re-traumatize that student.
Okay, thank you. My next question on here now is victim impact statement. So do you have any information about kind of how that will work, or like just kind of what the process will be for that?
Absolutely. So the changes that you see for the interventions and corrective strategies on all of the various discipline matrices, which we will review tonight, were done in consultation with our MTSS department, led by Amy Gannon and her team. So again, we didn't want this just to be a document of corrective actions from a student discipline standpoint. We also wanted to try and organize the interventions and supports that we put in place for students after an incident has occurred. So again, a lot of the recommendations that you see in the red line tonight are the result of those continued meetings with the MTSS team and looking at the research and everything that that team is doing. So again, I do know that there's a lot in the red line as far as what things are happening there. But again, this was the result of multiple meetings between myself and that team to try to get to the point that we're at today. In regards to the victim impact statement, in part of those conversations, we did discuss that knowing how that affected the victim is going to be a very crucial part of not only addressing the accused student's behavior to make them understand what they caused about the other student. But I know these types of statements are also common in court cases and those kind of things to have a victim impact. And then the judge kind of considers those things as well. But again, at the end of the day, we want everybody to understand how their behavior affects others. And so we thought that this would be a useful tool to help facilitate those conversations.
Yeah, so I'm sorry, maybe I should have worded my question different. So I am familiar with them. I guess my question was more about the procedure of them. So if a student is writing a victim impact statement, for example, court is a perfect example. They have a court advocate or counselor that sits with them when they write victim impact statements. So if you're saying MTSS was a part of it, I'm assuming then it would be in conjunction with mental health support in some caveat, whether that's a counselor or whatever it is. So, okay, and then my last thing on this page is in the intervention section, escort to class is redlined and then it's put in a corrective strategy. So I wondered if, since it's an intervention that could potentially be used to ensure safety of a student, so me to feel safe in a situation, me be escorted, it could be an intervention in addition to a corrective. So if perpetrator needs to be escorted, that'd be a different response than for my safety, I need to be escorted to wherever. So I didn't know if that could be continued to be added back, but just in a different, I don't know if there's needs to be a different way to word it, but escorts could be positive or, or just a corrective strategy. And then, okay, I think that's all my questions for right now.
Yeah, absolutely. I think when we were looking at moving escort to class, we were only considering it from the accused student side, and we were thinking that was going to be more of a corrective side or corrective action implemented by administration. But after hearing your comments there, I could see how that would be beneficial from the victim standpoint too, making them feel like they have a safe person that can, walk with them through the school. So I can certainly try to work on some language to make that happen.
Okay, that would be great, because I know that's something that students have have voiced a concern about, is just having an adult walk them to their classes, depending on what the circumstances. So, and if that would be something that was added in a safety plan, I just think it'd be good to be an intervention.
Absolutely,
so,
thank you. Any other questions, comments, concerns regarding the proposed changes to the bullying matrix? All right, seeing none, I'll move on. The next discipline matrix, which we will review tonight, is our damage to property matrix. There are two major changes here for this school year. After a lot of feedback in various stakeholder groups, we wanted to take out 2 words from existing titles of the definitions. So we are proposing removing the word vandalism from the damage to property / vandalism title, and removing the word burglary from the burglary / theft title. Again, those codes will still continue to exist. We are just renaming what those code definitions are. And some of the concerns that we received from stakeholder groups were that the words vandalism and burglary are associated with criminal acts. And so again, just trying to be more politically correct with how we are using our language here within the code of conduct. That was a proposed change that we wanted to bring before the board and see if everybody was okay with those changes as well. The codes will still continue to exist, level 2 for less than $500 and level 4 for more than $500 for the damage to property, and that will cover intentional or unintentional destruction of property. So again, I'll give you a few minutes to look over the proposed changes there, and I'll field any questions on this slide as well. Ms. Bennett?
So, okay, on page 13 for interference with school personnel, so providing false identification, refusing to provide an identification, and or fleeing from school personnel. What?
You're a slide ahead of me.
Oh, sorry. Oh, sorry.
I will come back to you when we get there, though. Last call for questions, comments, concerns on damage to property. All right, we will move on to our disobedience matrix. So again, just a couple pointers here. So again, failure to attend level 1 is more of going to be a clerical change. We have existing codes for failure to attend level 2 and level 3, which says students who have failed to attend 4 to 10 or 10 or more administrative actions. However, we did not currently have an option for how to document the first 3. As Ms. Bennett was mentioning, the interference with school personnel, level 1, we are looking at removing that code because the language was very, very similar to what is existing for interference with school personnel, level 2. One of the other parts of that was fleeing from administration, which when we look at fleeing for us, that's like leaving the site of the building and everything else, which is already under our leaving without permission level 2 code. So again, we felt that this was just a redundant code and we're looking to kind of pare down a little bit within our codes. Leaving without permission level 2 is going to have proposed language for repeated level 1 violations. So again, students who leave the classroom more than once and receive a referral for that could be escalated to level 2. Currently in the code, that would always remain as a level 1. And then I'll kind of, sheepishly talk about the last piece up here with the gang-related behavior. When we brought the proposed changes before all of you last year at this time, we removed all discipline codes associated with gang-related behavior. However, that language snuck by us is in part of a repeated level 3 violations. So this is just an effort by us to try and clean up after ourselves here and remove that language once and for all from the code of conduct. So again, I will open it up for any questions regarding this slide as well. Ms. Bennett, you already had your light on previously, so I'll come to you first.
Okay, so for elopement, that would be under level 2, leaving without permission.
So elopement would be leaving without permission level 1 for the first time that a student leaves a classroom without permission of the teacher. If the student leaves the building or the site of a field trip, that would be a level 2.
Okay.
And if the student receives more than one disciplinary referral for leaving the classroom without permission, that could then escalate to a level 2 under these proposed changes.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely. Are there any other questions, comments, or concerns regarding the disobedience matrix and proposed changes? Seeing none, we'll move on to our next matrix, which is our harmful materials matrix. Again, this is going to be found on pages 16 through 18. The major proposed change in this discipline matrix is we are proposing the removal of alcohol and drugs level 3 and having all of our alcohol and drug violations be level 4 violations moving forward. Prior to the 22-23 Code of Conduct proposed changes, we did have all drugs and alcohol cases as level 4 violations. At that point in time, we had conversation with various stakeholder groups about trying to provide interventions and resources for students within our buildings. So we ultimately made the decision at that point in time to reduce marijuana-related offenses to a level 3 violation. The idea there was that, again, we could provide resources to those students within our building and hopefully mitigate some of the issues that we were seeing. A lot of the data that we have looked at shows that this has had an adverse effect from what we were hoping, as far as the number of violations that are occurring and the disruption that this is causing within our buildings. As previously mentioned, many of our students are afraid to use the bathrooms at school for fear of being caught up in these types of behaviors. So what we really wanted to do here was still hold students accountable for drug-related offenses while still working with families to try and keep students in our buildings and continue that support. So what we are looking at doing here as a proposal is that moving forward, all alcohol and drug-related offenses, including marijuana in any form, would go back to being a level 4 violation. The school would continue to work with the families and provide an opportunity for those students to have a drug assessment to determine whether or not that student needs additional support beyond what we can provide just as a MTSS intervention. If the family is willing to engage in that drug or alcohol assessment to determine if their student needs additional support, we would work with that family to keep that student at the zone school on a zone school EIA. That way we can continue to provide the supports for that student at the school without removing them to an alternative learning site. And if the family is willing to engage in those types of actions, we would be willing to work with that family to try and keep that student at school. If the student violates the terms of that EIA agreement, we would then at that point in time look at moving that student to an alternative learning site for the remainder of that EIA period. So again, we're still trying to continue to offer that student a second opportunity, but again, we are trying to put some of that onus on our families and try to get more community and family involvement with this process in our accountability of trying to help students not be involved in drug activities at our schools. The other change up there is for our possession or use of transportation or explosive materials, which sounds very scary. Believe me, if a kid came in with a bomb or a hand grenade, that would be treated as a weapon. This code definition here is reflective more of a larger scale firework, such as a Roman candle or something to that extent. There was just some duplicate language within the code definition, so we are proposing to remove the second sentence of that definition. But again, now that I've kind of gone through that, I will open it up for any questions, and I see Ms. McCall with a light on, so I'll start with you.
Thank you. So my question is, just along the same lines that I asked around bullying, what the occurrences are and the data behind it. Additionally, have you guys looked at other models of other school districts where marijuana has been legalized and its effect on, you know, the high school students and stuff now? I'm in the buildings quite a lot and I smell it a lot. So to me, it seems like they're not even afraid to, like, whatever. So all the stuff that we just went over is if they get caught.
Correct.
Right? So there's no, okay, so I'm just trying to figure out if you got any of that data that shows, you know, just how is
how prevalent it is?
Yeah, how prevalent it is in different schools, and just trying to figure out how, or do we have a prevention plan or something in place where, I guess so. But this is what I'm saying. If I'm walking in the hallway, I smell marijuana. Mm-hmm. If a teacher's walking in the hallway and they smell marijuana, can they tap the kid and say, "Hey, you smell like marijuana," type of thing, or like what is it? Because it seemed like everybody was just letting it pass, like, "Oh yeah, this is our new cologne. We got the marijuana cologne," you know, type of thing. Because I mean, it's really prevalent in all the schools. I'm not. So I'm just trying to figure out, like, how are we going to be able to discourage that? Because it seems to me like students aren't scared. Like, they feel, you know, and it's been, you know, I was born in '79 and I've seen all the movies and stuff. So I know it's been around for a whole lot.
Absolutely.
So I just need to know, like, if you can see if there's any kind of thing, like, what is Colorado doing? Or, you know, what is Los Angeles, California doing? You know, the states that have had the legalization of marijuana and the impact on the students.
Absolutely. So again, just to follow up on your questions here, I will pull that data for you. And again, I will have Dr. Jarrett share it with you as far as the superintendent update is concerned. And then I will also do some research into some other states that have legalized marijuana for the adult population and see what that has done as an effect on their schools.
And I'm sorry, you know, I'm not asking you to do a dissertation or anything, you know, because it's a lot, right? But I'm just kind of curious. I'm gonna do some on my end as well. I'm kind of curious on, you know, what the trajectory of it and what kind of preventions and interventions were made to help decrease the usage.
In addition to the research component, what I can add, and certainly legal counsel can jump in if I'm in any way incorrect in my, I'm going to talk about a legal interpretation here, but really we have a standard of reasonable suspicion. And so I think what is going to have to happen on a building by building basis with direction from the district is there really has to be clarity on a standard that is consistent, so we're not singling students out about what reasonable suspicion. Obviously, someone smelling like marijuana, dilation of pupils, there are lots of different factors we could go into, but at the end of the day, there is nothing prohibiting us from taking action based on reasonable suspicion, assuming it is implemented consistently and equitably, and we are not signaling students out. So this would also be very much a training issue for us. But the sense that we sort of have to universally tolerate this because it is legal is not in fact the case. This is not okay for students under the age of 18 per our code of conduct. And so this is not something where we have to sort of be disempowered, but it is something we have to move forward carefully and balance the individual rights of students with what is good for the overall safety of the building climate, and frankly for some of those students who may be using a substance in a way that is harmful to their academics or their own personal safety. I don't know if anyone would want to add to that.
Right, again, distribution does not change. So in our code, we're not changing the level 4 distribution. So if you come to school to sell or you purchase, that is continued to be a level 4. We just, based on the information from our schools, to your point, students that do smell of marijuana are searched potentially. They are absolutely they need to be brought down to the administrator, and it begins an investigation, which could include a search. If we do not find anything on the student, we always call home when we have students in our administrative offices. And so that starts the conversation, the proactive conversation in those instances of what might be going on.
Thank you.
Ms. Bennett?
I also think there's there's something important to add when we're talking about bullying, and even when we're talking about this, that when we're pulling data and like having instances or saying, you know, this building and these codes, that it's all instances that are reported and that we know of, right? So even when Dr. Jarrett's going to share data, like how many things happen in our building that we know nothing of, right? And we have the data of when it was reported, but I agree with what Ms. McCall is saying, that it's just is the experience, and that's something my constituents bring to me constantly, is this issue in particular. So I appreciate that we're trying to do something about it, and that kind of leads into my few questions that I have. So on page 16 for, on the left-hand side for interventions, in level 2, for example, it has referral to community agency for drugs and alcohol, but if all drugs and alcohol are levels above level 2, does that belong to be an intervention for level 2?
You're correct. That should not be listed in the level 2 violation, as there are, well, I think with tobacco and electronic smoking devices there too, if a student is having multiple issues with nicotine, I think that was part of why that was left in there. But again, I do see how it's misleading because it specifically addresses drugs and alcohol as opposed to nicotine. So we can look at taking that out if that's something that we're recommending.
Okay, just to make it more clear, I mean, if it says tobacco like that, that would be fine. And then on page 17 for, so it says referral to community agency for drugs and alcohol, but if there's no drugs and alcohol in this section, same thing as before, that would be level 4, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, and then on this page as well, for corrective strategies, it says mandatory police notification, which I know that we do for level 4, so if this got moved to level 4, so nothing in level 3 would be mandatory police notification, correct?
So in this situation here, anytime a student is found in possession of a vaping device, we always contact the police department so that they can test it, so that we can know how to move forward with our discipline. So they will test it. If it comes back as THC, we proceed in one avenue. If it's a nicotine vape, we handle that a little bit differently.
Okay, so could we remove alcohol from that section?
Yes.
Or do they have to be grouped together?
They can be separated.
Okay, and then my last question. So on page 18 on the left-hand side, it says referral to community agency 4, but then all of the intervention items are redlined. So it doesn't say what the referral would be for?
So the only thing in there that is not in strike through is drugs and alcohol. So after the proposed change goes through, that would read referral to community agency for drugs/alcohol.
Is there a reason why substance abuse use treatment couldn't be added? I think it sounds more trauma-informed than drugs and alcohol, but I don't know if anybody else has an opinion.
So the recommendation here is to use substance abuse/use treatment, not the drugs or alcohol?
Yeah, because so we're saying a student's substance use is of concern, so I feel like referring them for treatment for substance use/abuse, to me, makes sense, but everybody else can weigh in as well. And then for, okay, so when you were saying that in the instances when a student has level 4 violation, they would be, you know, a conversation with family to say if you follow ABC that we're asking you to do, then you could have zone school EIA and, you know, complete services here. So the referral to do that would be RPS providing a referral to Rosecrans counselor to do assessment for drug and alcohol. Is that correct?
Yes. So currently we contract with Rosecrans. We have 8 full-time positions for behavioral health support personnel in our buildings. They are currently at all 4 of our traditional high schools as well as Roosevelt. And then in addition to that, they are at 3 of our middle schools, which exact, I want to say it's Risa, Flynn, and West. But if I'm incorrect there, I can follow up with you guys on that as well. And speaking for next school year, what we are looking to do is continue to expand on the number of people that are in those positions. And even if this case happens at a building that is not currently represented by one of those 8 positions, as a district, we will work to ensure that those people can provide coverage for other schools that need that. So that way families can all have this assessment process done within our schools. As we know that transportation can be an inequity, ability to seek, medical practice and those kind of things can be an inequitable thing as well. So the goal here is to be able to provide those types of assessments directly through the school district with the staff that we have here.
Okay, so just given the sheer number of reports that I know just in this past year, for example, that made it to us, if you are saying all level 3s and all level 4s will now be level 4s, to me that's a significant increase in assessment. So I know I've already voiced this before, but to only have 8 mental health professionals who are also providing mental health support in addition to doing assessments for mental health, doing assessments for substance use, running groups, that seems not a correct capacity that we would be having an expectation moving forward. So I want to make sure if we are prepared to say all level 4 and these are the steps that we're going to take, that we would be also ready in an intervention standpoint, that we wouldn't be saying that this is what we're going to do and then later have it figured out.
Absolutely.
So
I do know that for those positions that we were just discussing, the BHSAPs, they do have a maximum caseload of 60 students per person. So if you're doing the math on that, we could potentially have 480 referrals for substance abuse at any one point in time, with the idea that the number of sessions that they have might dwindle off as they get further away from the date of incident. So while again, that's still a lot of students and, you know, a lot of people potentially per case manager, so to speak, I do think that it is realistic given the numbers that we've seen for this year.
So that would be just substance use, though? That's not mental health?
Correct.
Correct,
So-
and the individuals also support our buildings and have caseloads that include mental health
That's correct.
in addition. So, and we have about 28,000 students, so we're not including the smaller people in this conversation. So I just am very uncomfortable making such a change when I don't feel that we have the adequate mental health, substance use services at the time.
Ms. Pearson.
Yes, so first of all, when we deal with the alcohol and drugs in our schools, we want to make sure that we're not overcomplicating and getting to a resolution. So contrary to popular belief, one of the greatest preventions will begin at home. That would be your number one prevention. Number two, what discussions are we having with students that have drugs and alcohol in their possession? And what is really going on? Are we probing? Where did they get it from? There's a lot of things that are now permitted in the home that shows up at school. When we get to the core of the issue, there lies the answer. So if we're going to make sure that we are engaging families, one of the best things we can do is help families understand that just because marijuana is now legal in the state of Illinois does not mean there is lenience in our schools. And what parents may permit, if any, outside of school, it is what it is. But I think that we can do a better job at making sure, as we can put forth the effort in working with families, to make sure they understand. Because I don't know how many times I've heard than not that, well, what is the big deal? Marijuana is now legal. And so I believe that there is a gap in understanding in how that affects the rules of our school. And as we work with and another thing, and I don't know that we really got this understood with families, because we offer EIAs and parents still refuse, then resulting in expulsion. So there is another opportunity for us to really make sure that parents understand that this is in the best interest of the student, that we believe in them, and whatever the issue or cause is, that we're here to support them. If we and we can't leave out our community partners, because this is a whole initiative. And if you're talking about drug and alcohol prevention, and I can't agree with Ms. Bennett more, that if you can't put things in place if you can't service. So that is something that we really need to give more consideration to, because it's one thing to say we have this in place, but there's a gap with service, right? So that being said, I think that we want to definitely make sure that if we're going to really include the family, that the families understand, and they also understand the expectation. It's not okay. I can go to a neighborhood grocery store and come out and smell like marijuana. And so I caution the district in tapping kids on the shoulder and say, hey, you smell like marijuana. We have to be careful with that. Because the day that you tap a kid on the shoulder and say you smell like marijuana, and there is no marijuana found, that's going to be a problem. If there's not reasonable, as Superintendent Jarrett indicated, suspicion. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Bennett.
Just me again. I know we also discussed in our committee, Mr. Carpenter and I and our team, about kind of what tier 1 universal interventions we can do, so whatever that means. But any information we can provide on the front end, and I know there's behavior talks, and Ms. Lawrence brought this up, that at the beginning of the school year, this is, you know, students are very much informed, but I also think the intervention piece to say, you cannot bring drugs and alcohol to school, you can't be under the influence, all those things, but if you need help, these are the ways that we can access help. So whatever that means and however we could go about doing that, but making sure that if students are taking the initiative to know that they're having an issue with substance use or abuse, that they have a resource and a kind of an alternative than just waiting until we find out about it and then we tell them they have to do something, which is not the way stages of change traditionally work. Sometimes it does, but just making sure that we're coming at this at multiple levels, like Ms. Pearson said too.
Thank you.
So I just wanted to address one other comment that was made about people being in buildings and smelling marijuana and only getting the referrals of which the students were referred, right? So one thing that Dave and I have done is add in the school visits this year and making sure that we heard the same thing at our teacher code of conduct review, and making sure that our teachers know and understand what to do is also very important. There was a lot of confusion about their role in the referrals for student discipline. So I wanted to say that. In addition to that, the next day after that meeting, we mandated that all referrals are returned to the teacher. So in some instances, the student was referred and the teacher never got a referral notice back about what happened. And that was confusing to the teachers. And so ensuring that we closed the loop with student discipline, we required all administrators who, however they wanted to do that, whether they wanted to send an email or they wanted to put it in the teacher's mailbox, but they were to return the referral that was sent from the teacher to ensure that the teacher knew that the student was dealt with.
And if I can just add one note here on the collaboration that it takes between prevention and corrective action, not only for that universal level of awareness, but also that when we have an MTSS team come around a student and there's suspected, mental health issues, that we're also asking questions about substance abuse because that Venn diagram it often intersects. And so as Mr. Graffi was, noting about our BHSAPs with Rosecrans, we also have MTSS social workers that are a new role this year. And so what Ms. Gannon is doing is really kind of working on creating a system so that we can deploy people by their expertise based on student need. And all of that is being considered as a part of our SY26 budget proposal and in partnership with our friends in student services. So we're really trying to work together on that prevention and corrective action.
And this was not presented without deep conversation between student services and the MTSS team.
The MTSS individuals that you're saying, are they CADC individuals? Certified alcohol and drug counselors?
No, which is why we're looking at this as a whole system and making sure that we have clear pathways for student support based on the personnel that we have.
Mr. Carpenter.
Thank you. I just have a question on level 2, it's got tobacco and electronic smoking devices. And I don't know, tobacco and electronic smoking devices are also illegal for people under 21, but they're treated much less strictly than drugs or alcohol, even though those are also, everything's illegal for people under 21. And so I don't know if there's ever been any discussion about changing that on tobacco and electronic smoking devices being more in line with the other prohibited substances, harmful materials.
Yeah, it was not specifically brought up on the various feedback loops this year, but that's certainly something that we can continue to look at and address to make that more consistent. Anything else on the harmful materials discipline matrix? All right, moving on to our last discipline matrix here is our physical aggression matrix. So the major change here is that, again, as part of the feedback that we received from the various feedback loops from schools, Schools feel the need to address physical aggression differently than how we've been doing it in the past. So again, when students engage in an actual fight, regardless of how that fight ends or where it takes place, we are looking at having that fight be able to be addressed as either a level 3 or a level 4 violation. Again, just because it's a level 3 or 4 violation does not mean that administrators have to assign exclusionary discipline. It just means, given the facts of that individual case and the circumstances of that investigation, they would then have the option of potentially removing that student to ensure the safety of remaining students and staff in the building. For a fight that occurred in the bathroom that did not require staff to break it up in the current school year, we did not have the option to even send that student home for the remainder of the day, let alone for multiple days at a time, to ensure that we could put safety processes in place to ensure that when that student returns, that we have the necessary supports for that student and for the remaining students in the building. So again, our proposed change there would negate the need for a physical aggression level 1 and 2 violation. So we are proposing that we remove those. The behavior that would have fallen under the physical aggression level 1, such as our play fighting, shadow boxing, slap boxing, those kind of behaviors, would then fall under reckless behavior, which is why we're proposing a removal of the words one-sided from that definition. So that would then encompass the two-sided low-level physical aggression type things. And then lastly, we see an increase in physically aggressive behaviors with planned fights in our schools, specifically at our secondary schools of middle school and high school. So if during the investigation, administration has some evidence to say that that incident was planned, whether there's a text chain between two students saying, meet me in the hall, we're gonna go fight, or that student is walking down the hall with a posse of students behind them, they all have their phones out in anticipation of a fight, that to us is a more egregious incident. So therefore, we are proposing that those incidents be allowed to be addressed at a level 4 violation. Again, just because they are coded as level 4 does not mean that you have to look at a removal of that student. It would just allow administrators to have that option to adequately address the student misbehavior. So again, I will field any questions on the physical aggression matrix. Seeing none, we'll move on. Were there any additional questions that we did not have an opportunity to address through the individual matrices sections? Ms. Bennett?
I have just a question. I think I had this question last year too, but on page 31, under student rights. Okay, so number 5, where it says in the middle, student rights, number 5, school administrators must make all reasonable efforts to ensure student, parent, guardian is present during questioning by law enforcement, or if the parent's not available, school administrator is present during questioning. Is there any way that this could be at the very beginning or somewhere towards the top, that that's the first thing that we would do? We would contact family to say that an individual is being asked to speak with local law enforcement, and then move on to the next steps, versus saying they have the right to refuse, local law enforcement, give consent, all the things that happen, that is the first action that's taken, versus saying that that's the right at the bottom?
Yeah, I don't have a problem with moving that to bullet point 1. Is that a consensus
okay?
by the board here as well to make that change?
That's fine, unless someone opposes, please speak up.
We can also make sure that that's part of our steps in our internal processes.
Okay, I would appreciate that. And I know last year we added in about the handcuffing and different things, which I appreciate that has continued to stay consistent, making sure students know what are things that they will or will not do that will get law enforcement involved, and then also the steps after. So I just, to reiterate that I appreciate very much that that's the process, but I think a student being presented with law enforcement could be very overwhelming, and having a support and that kind of being whatever attempts we can make first, and then the next steps, I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you. Board President Pearson.
Yes, so where are we with the cell phone?
So regarding the cell phones, I know there's a lot of districts across the country right now that are looking at cell phone bans and those types of things. When you read the existing language within our code of conduct, we do effectively have a cell phone ban in place. Cell phones are only allowed in specific circumstances. Number one, obviously, being if that cell phone is a part of a student's IEP or 504 plan. Most commonly, we will see those for diabetic students where they have glucose monitoring to their phones. There are other exceptions for why those would be part of those plans as well. Our current code of conduct also reads that cell phones can be used at the discretion of the building administration or by the teacher on a case-by-case basis. So outside of those avenues for cell phones should be put away and out of sight and not be utilized unless they have been given permission for one of those specific circumstances.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, I do have another question.
Yes.
So I noticed the paper portion or the student code of conduct and booklets, we didn't dispense last time, correct?
Correct.
So how are we helping community members understand? We know that there is a high rate of illiteracy and subliteracy among the adult population. And is there, and I believe I mentioned this before, some type of audio where it relates to the student code of conduct and it being made available online? Are the schools thoroughly communicating that with parents? I had a situation at a middle school. There's no need for me to name the middle school, but the interpretation of some levels were not easily understood, and it involved the student was accused of being aggressive towards a staff member, but the staff member actually was the one who provoked the student. And so that takes me back to, we have rules and regulations for our students, and in those rare occasions where things are not exactly handled properly as they should at school, how are we going to help parents thoroughly understand the student code of conduct from just a neutral area as opposed to a defense mechanism?
Sure. I think there's a couple different things there. Number one, you mentioned that we are no longer distributing the paper copies of the Code of Conduct, and we are directing our families to the online website. We are continuously working with the communications department to make that more accessible. We will continue to offer the Student Code of Conduct in our most spoken languages as we are required to do so. We just recently had another meeting with the communications department where, as a summer project, we are going to be looking at continuing to build that out, not in a PDF form necessarily, but also trying to get that onto the website. So that way, when we do have that translate button on our website for all of the material that's directly on there, not as a linked attachment, that would be able to translate into their native language. So again, that is something that we are continuing to work towards. It is a little bit of a slow process to get to where we ultimately want it to be. But again, those are the directions that we're moving into. And then again, within the Code of Conduct too, it talks about not only how do we address the expectations with our students, which we do through the behavior conversations with students in the first 15 days of school as we are required to do, but it also has opportunities for schools to present that information to their families, whether that be through a parent-teacher conference or a open house night or something like that at the schools, where they have the opportunity to present those to the families and community members that come into the buildings as well. So again, I think those are some of the things that we have in place. But again, if you have other ideas as to how we could expand on that, I am certainly open to those suggestions.
I'll get back with you on that. I do have a few things in mind, and we can talk offline, as Ms. Lawrence said.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
No problem.
So we do student presentations and teacher presentations, and we could very easily add a parent presentation to have accessible with the audio on our website as well as every school's website. And then we can level that by the student's age as well, so that we're making sure that our parents understand. Again, we always put our contact information out there for direct conversations with parents, and they can always Let's Talk us. We do a very thorough job of reviewing packets for you so that we're not bringing, things that you should not be seeing. We are also, this school year and moving further down into the code, like level 2, looking at all code violations, whether they come as an EIA or an expulsion. So this year, Mr. Graffy's been looking at all level 3 violations to ensure that the code is enforced equitably and correctly. Just want to let you know that those things are also happening, but any parent can reach out to us at any time if they would like us to review student discipline.
Thank you. I'm just curious, what was the attendance for the listening sessions? Anyone have those numbers?
Yeah, so the community listening sessions, the one that we held at Auburn was the Wednesday, where we had that ice storm that was coming in. So again, I know our communications department sent out the alert saying that about half of our after-school activities had been canceled. So again, I think that alert going out may have caused some people to believe that that activity might have also been canceled. So at that presentation, we had 8 community members. At the multilingual presentation that we did at East High School, again, as Mr. Carpenter indicated, we had a small army of interpreters ready to go in the event that we had a large turnout for families that were speaking Spanish, Arabic, Swahili, and Karen. We had interpreters ready to go for all of those languages. Unfortunately, we only had 5 people show up for that one. So in past years, the East High School presentation has typically brought in, I would say, about 40 community members. And historically, the Auburn presentation is generally going to be about 25 to 30. So we were definitely down on both of those this year. But I do agree with Mr. Carpenter that I think the weather was partially to blame for both of those.
And we shamelessly plug our parent advisory all the time. You can find that information inside the front cover of the Code of Conduct if you're interested in becoming a member. And we also had about 70 REA and other staff members at our staff review of the Code of Conduct.
We have a pretty strong presence on Facebook. So have we considered using Facebook as a means to, whether it be a monthly update or a flash of information where it relates to drugs and alcohol or group violence or those items that are frequent flyers in our disciplinary packet? If we could just do a news flash on Facebook on how that's handled without an overload of information, but just kind of those top 5 things that we're seeing frequently. If we could just do some snippets on that, everyone, not everyone, but Facebook is frequently visited, so on that we could always share it and, ask community members to pay attention to that and community leaders, organizations to help get that word out.
Absolutely, thank you. I will work directly with our communications team to see what we can do as far as the media burst.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Ms. McCall.
Just speaking on the media burst, I just got a text from RPS 205 about the going online, the registration, the link for the registration. Maybe do stuff like that. Maybe put a, here I go, giving y'all free stuff. Have a picture like so drugs, no drugs and alcohol, and just send the link out to everybody, and then the parent or whoever it goes to can click the link and see it. So maybe something like that goes out. I get stuff from schools I'm not even a part of. So I think that's a really good thing a good avenue to use as well.
Yeah, and I know Ms. Bennett has brought this up too for like Mental Health Awareness Month and those kind of things. If we can kind of tailor those media bursts to be whatever the represented month is tied to our discipline data, that would be a good opportunity for us to get that information out in front of the communities. So I definitely think that that's something that we can expand on. Right. Any other further questions? Otherwise, I'll close with my last remark. Oh, Mr. Carpenter, sorry.
No, I don't have any other. I was going to thank you, but if you've got another remark, and you're done, or did you have anything?
I was simply going to say thank you for
Thank
what
you. So again, just the final message for everybody here with a lot of the proposed changes tonight. We know there aren't a lot of changes, but the changes that are coming are some big items. The message that we really want to send to all stakeholders, whether that be students, parents, teachers, other staff, board members, is that our schools are not a place to come and do drugs. Our schools are not a place to come and fight. Our schools are a place to come and learn. And so again, with that in mind, those are the reason that we have presented the changes for you tonight. I thank you for allowing me to speak and for going over on my time, so I apologize. But again, thank you for allowing me to address these concerns with you tonight, and we look forward to the vote on the regular meeting of the board in a few weeks. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. We have another presentation for our committee on the academic return of investment, secondary math, and obviously we're over our time. I don't know what else. It didn't look like there were other presentations on the agenda, but I could be wrong about that. So I don't know if the board wants to hear that tonight or move it to a different night.
No, we want to hear it tonight, and yeah, if we go over, that's what we signed up for. It's okay.
Fine. Then I'll turn it over to Heidi and Morgan. Yep. Thank you.
All right, good evening. We will try to be brief and honor your time. We're here to do our mid-year report on our academic return on investment study. And I'm going to begin just by reminding us sort of what the study is and why it matters. And then I'm going to hand it over to Dr. Gallagher. So again, everything that we do is rooted in our universal goals, in particular, middle school on track, increasing the graduation rate, and increasing freshmen on track. We use a process called Plan, Do, Study, Act, or PDSA, which is the heart of our decision-making in our district. And basically, that is a study around return on investment, which focuses on two questions, which we've mentioned several times before. Which programs drive student achievement? But most importantly, what works for whom and under what conditions? And that those are really the questions that we seek to answer in any academic return on investment study. As a reminder, the AROI is a 10-step process, and we have completed the study design. We are really pretty firmly in the yellow section of action steps and support, where we are rapidly learning and then adjusting our approach. So why did we choose secondary math? For several good reasons. Generally speaking, you don't pick the things that are going really, really well. Those don't require a careful eye for study necessarily, unless you're looking at expanding. Our goal was to pick something that we knew needed support. And so our student data and our standards of practice data both show us that we've had a consistent drop, and also that those scores have lagged when compared to literacy. We also are really interested in having a vertical alignment of our AROI research, which includes our grades 6 through 12. And then also, this has been our longest running curriculum redesign and instructional shift. In December, Dr. Gallagher and I presented a little bit more about what integrated math is. We differentiated between the structure and the resource, and we talked about those instructional shifts and the standards. This is just a reminder of that. Year in review. In August, in your written board update, we provided you with 4 key strategies that we were going to use this year as a part of our study. And at our midpoint, these are updates on those 4 strategies. First of all, our job was to build a system to monitor full implementation in grades 6 and grade 9 specifically, but all grade levels so that we can learn. And Dr. Gallagher will share that data with you here in a little bit. Strategy 2 was to create a feedback mechanism to ensure that teacher and student voice are engaged. We partnered with our DEI team to ensure that we elevated student voice. We asked very specific questions about how students best learn math and when they're best engaged. We also, our accountability team under the leadership of Christina Miller, has visited every PLC in our district now to really learn from them how their PLC structure is working, and then she's provided an overview of strengths and opportunities for each PLC. We also have our support team that we engage every month to support our core team in our decision making. We are also in an ongoing conversation with other districts to explore alternatives. I'm interested most particularly with Metro Nashville. We're working on making a stronger connection there. And then finally, exploring the content and context, and the environmental impacts. We know that staffing has been a challenge. We know that a lot of our teachers are teaching overloads. We know that a lot of our teachers are new or maybe teaching a single section, or we may even have long-term subs. If that is our reality, then what is our best support to ensure a strong learning environment for every student? These are the definitions of success for our study, and then I'm going to hand it over to Dr. Gallagher. We believe we will be successful when we have at least 80% of our sixth grade students receiving passing grades in all 4 quarters. Same for high school and integrated math. We also are measuring, or our goal is that 80% of integrated math students will see an increase in their math assessment score, that's their achievement score, from their 8th grade PSAT to their 9th grade ACT. Little footnote here that the state of Illinois did change our assessment from SAT to ACT, but we do have a formula to convert those scores. And then finally, that 80% of our 6th grade and integrated math students see growth, that should say in STAR. I'm not sure what happened to our last 2 letters. Okay, I'll pass it over to Dr. Gallagher.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. These next several slides are going to be very data rich, so I will be going over them quickly, but want you to have the opportunity at the end to ask any questions that you may have. I will pause though on this particular slide when we're starting off looking at middle school and have that definition of success that 80% of 6th grade students will pass in all 4 quarters. You do see that there is a significant dip there at Kennedy. That does correlate to their STAR fall and winter growth. Kennedy, of all of our middle schools, 6th grade, was our lowest proficiency at 21%. When you dig deeper into their 6th grade cohort, you do see that they have roughly 30% of their 6th graders have an IEP. And at 7th and 8th grade, that's closer to 20%. So if you look across, and Kennedy, of course, is our lower enrollment middle school. So if you look across the sections of 6th grade math courses that are offered there, there are 2 instructional courses. There are 4 gen ed sections. 2 of those have co-teachers in them, and then there is 1 honors section. Despite seeing that the achievement has gone down there in terms of the proficiency, Kennedy, outside of special program middle schools, is showing the greatest student growth percentile. So while they're currently at the lowest rate of proficiency, they're growing at an accelerated rate relative to their other middle schools, so that they are working to close that gap between where the students are coming in and where they're being measured for proficiency. Right now, those Kennedy 6th graders are tracking at about a middle of 4th grade in terms of their math equivalency level. And if you break out the 30% of the special education students, they're coming in at a late 2nd grade level. So clearly need to maintain the standards and the curriculum so that we're teaching them at that tier 1 grade level content, but need to continue to do the acceleration of closing that gap by providing quality supports and interventions, whether that is through special education or MTSS. But fully see that.
Quick question before you go on.
Yes.
Just for my clarification. So this is 80% of the 25% of the students that are following the integrated math, or is this the whole population?
This is 80% of the 6th graders that are receiving the integrated math curriculum.
80% of
passing
the 25%.
all their classes. So there's roughly 144 students, I want to say, they're in that 6th grade cohort.
All right, so it's 80% of the 25% that are being taught the integrative math.
No.
I'm getting confused.
I'm not sure where the 25% is coming from.
25% is, there's only 25% of teachers teaching the integrative math.
That's a different subject. I think you're merging two conversations.
So, okay, I guess a better question is this all of the sixth grade math period, whether they're being taught integrated math or they're being taught
Correct.
the other math?
Yes.
That's what I'm asking.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, just to make sure that we're clear for the rest of the report, integrated math is grades 9, 10, and 11.
Okay.
It's integrated math 1, 2, and 3. K-8 math is naturally integrated. It has always been integrated, but we call it just math 6, math 7, math 8.
Okay, that's why I just want to make sure that
Thank you,
what
Heidi.
the population was. Thank you.
Okay, next slide is the similar or same definition of success broken down by demographic. Here I had alluded towards the Winter Star performance of Kennedy, but you can see it across all schools here, but you can see in their student achievement where I had cited Kennedy was the lowest, but in terms of the percentage of students that are growing at a rate that we would want to see, Kennedy is the highest. Here's another way to look at the correlation between student proficiency on the STAR test and their mark values or grades that they're receiving in sixth grade math. So if you look in that upper left-hand area, if students are above that green bar, that means that they are demonstrating proficiency on the test, but that they are also receiving D's or F's in their coursework. So do not want to see that anomaly. And then if you look in the bottom right, similarly or conversely, these are all students that are performing below expected proficiency, but are receiving high marks or high grades in that course.
I'm sorry, can you repeat what you just said?
Sure. If you're looking up in the bottom left, see how that box is above the green line? So these are kids that are meeting or exceeding proficiency on the STAR exam, but they're on that left-hand side because they're receiving less than a 70%. They're receiving a D or an F for their grade in the course.
Thank you.
On the flip side of that, on the bottom right, that's where you're seeing students that are performing, they're getting an A in their math class, but they're below proficiency on the STAR winter exam. So what we would want to see is a correlation. The grades that a student receives should correlate to their proficiency on that content and skills that they're being taught. So we'd like to see all those dots as close to that blue line as possible to see that correlation. This is now switching from middle school to high school, where you can see how they're doing in terms of their on-track rate. Here it is again, broken up by demographic. Here are the Winter Star results for integrated Math 1 students.
Excuse me, Mr. Gallagher, can you
Yes.
go back to the previous slide, please?
You're welcome.
I had a question before you started.
Go ahead, last slide.
Well, before you continue on.
Sure.
So this is the integrated math for the high school, right?
Correct.
So this is the 25% that's being, I'm trying to get to the.
Are you thinking back to the implementation data where we
Yes.
identified that in roughly 25% of the classrooms, we saw it fully implemented?
Right.
Okay. That set of data is coming up later on in the slides where we'll come back to the observations. In terms of the total number of students for this data, it's all students that are assigned to an integrated math course.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
That's what I was getting at. Thank you very much.
This is a similar correlation for where we are seeing either students that are at proficiency but are receiving a D or an F, or conversely, students that are receiving an A in their course but are below proficiency. We would want to see as few dots as possible in those quadrants. We had reported out earlier where we were in terms of the foundational training for teachers and the percentage of teachers at our high schools that had received that as of the beginning of the year to where we're at now. If you look all the way over to that 90%, it's showing 45 of 50 teachers have received the full foundational training per conversation with Heidi right before this. Jump in.
Yeah, we actually are, we scrubbed the data over the last couple of days and we're at 46 out of 50 teachers. And I just am really grateful for the partnership with our principals who ensured coverage for our teachers so they could come and receive that training. We have only 4 teachers left. The situation of those 4 teachers, 1 teacher has completed 2 out of 3 days, but he had professional obligations that kept him away from the final day. We will provide that in-house. We have 1 teacher that teaches generally calculus and AP Calc, and he has 1 section of integrated math 3. He had it last year and this year. We're going to examine his schedule coming up for next year to determine if that's going to be a legacy section that he has. We'll ensure he has that full training for integrated math. We had 1 new teacher at Jefferson High School who teaches special ed instructional math. He missed the hiring and the opportunity to do it in the summer. We're going to provide that to him before the end of the school year. He has 2 in-house experts in his school. And then a second teacher is in our ED program teaching integrated math. We'll also ensure that we provide that in-house. And then they'll also be able to follow up then with the next level training next year. That will bring us to 100%.
Okay, when we pause here, we're also, beyond making sure we had the initial training for all the staff, we're also making sure that we're getting into classrooms. Both our standards of practice team that is comprised of district level staff and the curriculum and instructional leads for integrated math and identified administrators in the schools. But we also are doing, outside of this data that's being collected by that team, for you all to see on this deck, we also have training taking place for all of our middle and high school administrators where they're all calibrating on the standards of practice related to both math and English language arts. And they have had visits in the fall to Jefferson and Flynn respectively. And now this month they'll be making additional visits to East and Risa to do that calibration so that all administrators are on the same page for these look-fors. And so when you look, there's 11 enumerated items that they are looking for when they're going into classrooms. For us to say that they're implementing the curriculum, we had said that they need to be implementing 80%. So if there's 11 items on here that they want to see, that means they want to see 9 out of the 11 items in that walkthrough. And that's where you get the 25% from. 25% of the classrooms observed had more than 9 of these 11 items observed. And so you could see when we want to get to that level of rigor and that level of fidelity to the curriculum, this goes beyond just the initial training that we had provided to the teachers at the beginning of the year. This comes into their PLC times where they have common planning time working together to make sure that they have very strong lesson plans, because it takes a lot to be able to hit more than 9 of these, and that's why we see that 25%. Further breakdown? And so this is where we get, when we last reported, Ms. McCall, where we're at that 25% last school year, marginal gains, 31, 33%, 6th and 9th grade. This is a breakdown, really two critical out of those 11 items. If you really boil it down, what are two things we really want to see? Are you using the instructional resources, and are you using student-centered collaborative strategies where it's team strategies for the students? And so if we broke it down looking at those core ones, that's the fidelity that we have for those look fors. Next steps, as I had mentioned, now getting through all of the initial or foundational trainings and having the plan to be at 100% there. We need to make sure that all of our administrators are calibrated and they're getting into classrooms. So we have set an expectation that our curriculum instructional leads, our teachers who are leading their 6th and 9th grade teams, that they're doing a minimum of 3 classroom observations a day, and that we have an identified administrator in each building that is also doing 3 observations each week, so that we should be just shy of 600 observations as we reach May 16th. Really a lot what we've heard from the field too is it's not just about getting like the initial foundational training. We have a lot of administrators and teacher leaders who want to see embedded coaching cycles begin to take place. So we have some schools that are piloting with the ROE to help lead them with that and how that will inform how they have their professional learning community meetings, their team meetings. We also have schools that are working directly with curriculum vendors in terms of the rollout. So Jefferson is going to be a school, Lincoln is a school that will be doing that. And then many of our schools, because of their status or their designation with the state, they're mandated to have learning partners. So in their selection of learning partners, they're looking for those learning partners that are going to be in alignment with providing the professional learning that's really going to beef up their math instruction. Right through it. And that pretty much sums up those last 3 slides. So I will leave it to you all for any questions you may have for Heidi or myself.
So I have a question, for clarification, so I'm understanding the data correctly. And I'm kind of looking at that, that table you had where it says classroom, no, not classroom observation, sorry. The table for training current state of integrated math teachers with CPM foundations for implementation training. Yes. So with the training, so I'm also looking at the sheet we have. So we have the 100%, 92%, 85%, so on, of teachers who have received the training. When did the training take place?
Actually, 3 different times. We had it over the summer as a 4-day series, and then we offered it again in the fall, and then we offered the follow-up in January. So we had summer, and then we had the first part of the learning in October and a follow-up in January.
Okay, so with the data that we're seeing where we have the grades on this sheet, it's not, it wouldn't be reflective of the fact that
teachers had been fully trained
Yes.
for the entirety of the year, correct.
Yes.
Many teachers finished their foundation on January 28th and 29th.
So we will have more accurate data as
What we're looking for now that we have an expectation of a minimum of 6 observations per school per week is that we are using that data to say, so what, now what? We're in classrooms, we're observing. I've directed the Director of Secondary Curriculum for Math, Mr. Rapoon, to pull our CILs together to really get to that so what, now what? So they can look at, now we've all been trained, now we're getting observation in our classrooms. How are we going to increase our use of the resource and increase those collaborative study team strategies that really are at the heart of integrated math and the student experience?
And remind me again, when does the STAR test take
What is STAR testing?
When does it take place?
When does it take place? It takes place 3 times per year, beginning of the year, middle of the year, and end of the year. And so we will wrap up with student data in May.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. McCall.
I just want to say thank you guys for fielding all the questions that I had and helping to break it down a little bit more to make it, digestible. And, you know, I'm just going to put the plea out there again, just keep trying to get more teacher participation in implementing this. So thank you, guys.
Mm-hmm.
Does anyone else have any questions for or regarding the academic return on investment presentation?
I have one.
Ms. Stanford.
Back on the slides are numbered 11 and 10 and 11, where it's showing the sixth graders 80% receive passing grades. What do you attest the decrease from school year 24 to the school year 25? Why the decrease? We went from 92 to 85. And you see what I'm talking about?
Yes, I do see that.
Total?
I think I don't know if I could give you a summation right here. I would say it's, we're not inflating grades year over year is one way to look at it.
Okay, I'd be curious what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, I'd be happy to follow up with that, but I'd want to get some feedback from the field.
Okay, thank you.
People who are closest to it.
President Pearson?
You know, I just want to share that anytime there is a decrease in numbers from year to year, if you can come prepared to answer that question, it would be most helpful. Thank you.
Sure. And, you know, I think one of the things I would just add that I completely agree that we always want to address any kind of a drop, but I do want to also point out this is not the same. So these are three different groups of students. And so that variability, if you look at it over a 3-year period, 83 to 92 to 85, it's a group that's performing better than the group did 2 years ago, but worse than last year's group. But we also aren't comparing one group of students. So I think as we consider that kind of analysis per Board President Pearson's suggestion, we would need to sort of look at fifth grade data would probably be a good place to start to see.
And that's why I wanted to point out.
We're starting in a different place.
Kennedy, as an example, if we're looking at their sixth grade group in isolation, they have 10% more special education students relative to seventh or eighth grade. So I would just, across all of our schools, those variables, I'd want to give you a more thorough answer there.
All right, if there's no other questions, thank you.
Thank you.
And then on our last topic for the Performance Monitoring Committee is the consent agenda items. If anyone has any questions on the consent agenda items. Do you have one, Ms. Pearson? Or? No. Okay.
I do.
Oh, Ms. Bennett.
I have a question on letter L. Excuse me, about student fees. Should I ask my question then? Okay. I didn't know if anyone was deciding who was going to answer it. Okay.
That would be Dr. Brown, but yeah.
Okay. Dr. Brown, I have a question about, for high school, there's an $80 parking fee. And I just have a question about why we have a parking fee.
That's a good question. That's a fee that's been charged for a number of different years. And most of the districts in the region charge for a parking fee. So it's up to you on whether you want to keep it or not. This is just our proposal.
So in my opinion, student driving is saving us transportation funding in theory. So I would be in support of not charging students to park because we're also charging them to learn to drive. So it's like, I also don't necessarily care for that either, but the parking fee, I feel like $80 per student is like not very necessary, but that's just my opinion.
Yeah, and on driver's ed, just so you know, if a student qualifies to have it waived, you know, based on income, they don't pay. And the vast majority of our students don't pay for driver's ed.
Ms. Stanford.
So if we get away from the parking fee, are we going to have enough spots for kids to park? It seems like there will be cars everywhere.
Yeah, I don't know.
I was also going to ask if along those lines, if that's enforced, does anybody check to see if kids have stickers on their cars? From anecdotal comments from people I know, they don't at all schools. And I guess along those lines, also, do we know how much we get from the vehicle stickers?
Yeah, I don't know off the top of my head. I'd have to look that up for you guys to see how much we're actually collecting. So.
Thank you, and I could have asked in advance, so I'm sorry, but if you could just, anytime between now and 2 weeks from now, that would be great. Thank you.
Yep, no problem.
Ms. Danvers?
On the same topic, I just wanted to say that I think it's great that we waive all of the fees that we waive, and it gives our students a lot more opportunity to participate in a lot of things that a lot of our kids would not be able to participate in. So kudos to finance and however we are able to do this, because it's important.
Are there any other questions on the consent agenda? If not, that will conclude our report. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Carpenter. Vice President McCall will now lead the Planning and Development Committee.
Thank you, Madam President. For 6A, we have Auburn High School's salutatorian scholarship donation. Daniel Nielsen was a salutatorian of Auburn High School, class of 2015. He passed away on November 16, 2021. Daniel was a National Merit recipient, captain of Auburn swim team, a devoted member of Habitat for Humanity, and graduated, excuse me, summa cum laude with a BS in electrical and computer engineering, along with an MBA. Mark and Stephanie Nelson would like to leave a lasting legacy honor to honor Daniel in the form of a $5,000 scholarship automatically awarded to the salutatorian of Auburn High School each year. Are there any questions regarding the Auburn High School salutatorian donation for Dr. Gallagher? Thank you. This will be brought forward to the March 18th, 2025 board meeting for action. Item 6B, grant accepted from ComEd for STEAM, Haskell STEAM Academy, Morgan Gallagher, sorry, is he still tied up?
Will someone please?
So Morgan
Mr.
Gallagher, on behalf of STEAM at Haskell, I can read the little blurb before till he come in. So yeah, so ComEd is one of the community partners that was awarded STEAM Center grant. This generous grant includes numerous coding and engineering components that align with our school's mission and vision. This grant is also includes storage, technology, furniture, and professional development for our staff to be well-versed in all of the products. We look forward to increasing our capacity to serve our students and prepare them for the 21st century. Are there any questions regarding the grant acceptance from ComEd for STEAM at Haskell STEAM Academy for Dr. Gallagher?
Mr. Gallagher, please return to the boardroom.
Do we have any questions? No questions. This will be brought forward to the March 18, 2025 board meeting for action. Next, we will have the preview of the consent agenda. Below are the consent agenda items for the Planning and Development Committee. We have item A, IFB 25-08, kitchen equipment and installation. Item B, IFB 25-24, Marshall east-west walls and doors, opening date of 3/6/25. Item C, IFB 25-27, McIntosh ES site improvement, opening date 3/11/2025. And item D, IFB 20-30, RESA middle school or MS locker room, roof replacement. Any questions for that? That completes the report for the Planning and Development.
Thank you, Vice President McCall.
It's the locker, not the lock room.
We're now on the Governance Committee. Board Policy 2.10 is updated to reflect statutory changes within the first year of board members' first term. They are now required to complete training on improving student outcomes and trauma-responsive learning environments. Are there any comments or questions about any of the proposed policy changes? If not, we are in review of Board Policy Series 200. As you all know, we are committed to making sure that we stay on schedule in terms of reviewing board policies and making any necessary changes. I'm going to ask board members if you have any recommendations in regards to any other policies, please forward them to me. I'll be composing an email to Attorney Holtley for any recommended changes. So please take a moment to review, preferably this week, as we have a conference coming up, and so we'll kind of lose almost a half a week of direct engagement. So there's a few policies that I have some questions on. Policy 2.20, which is the powers and duties of Board of Education, and item or number 6, entering contracts using public bidding procedure when required. I just want to make sure that we are consistent with the bidding procedure in terms of like the number of bids or how we make bidding public knowledge. And that's just a statement to make sure that we're consistent with that. And number 8, establishing an equal educational opportunity policy that prohibits unlawful discrimination. I recall going to, I believe it was the Tri-Conference about now 3 years ago, and there was a district that developed a resolution, and it is my desire that we collectively as a board develop resolutions in support of some of our policies. And we'll talk about that more in some future committee of the whole and what that looked like.
Madam President?
Yes.
I would also add to that, that Board Policy 7.10 is the Equal Educational Opportunity Policy, if anyone wishes to reference it.
Yes, I'm aware of that, and we're going to address that when we collectively agree on a resolution. Thank you. And some of these, if you notice, I had not previously noticed exhibits on previous, when we had actual board docs, it was a little easier to retrieve policies. But I've noticed some exhibits on some of these, and some of them were dated and some were not, but I'll follow up with Lori on that. Policy 2.50, do anyone have any questions in regards to the board term of office? Okay. Policy 2.80 Board of Education. There includes the oath and conduct of board members. And then there's an exhibit, the adoption date, classification, revised dates is not indicated, but there's number 10, I want to focus on a little bit. Indicates I will strive for a positive working relationship with the superintendent, respecting the superintendent's authority to advise the board, implement board policy, and administer the district. So in addition policies, it talks about the relationship between the superintendent and the board. I want to be very careful with the verbiage that we use in the exhibits, because I think that that's where there is a disconnect with some communication and areas of opportunity. So the superintendent is an employee by contract, and we want to continue to focus on the recommendations from administration as opposed to advice, because we have resources that we commit to through IASB, and so we have a lot of knowledge at our fingertips. And so I challenge board members to really take advantage of that, and as we cohesively work with our superintendent, that we be open to suggestions and recommendations that he have to offer. So that would be, I'll forward that minor change to Attorney Holy, excuse me. I would encourage board members to review the policy 2.105 in regards to ethics and gift ban, as it was not, it was revised in 2020, but I don't see any review dates. Policy 2.110. Does any board members have any questions regarding qualification, term, duties, and board officers? So we utilize our CFO as treasurer, and we have Laura Fromm, who is board administrator. So I would ask feedback from Attorney Holy in terms of any verbiage, and we can have a side conversation, any verbiage change on that. Again, there's 2.130 is the board and superintendent relationship. I encourage board members to review that. And I want to also include that as we continue to review board policy, that the note, the board, the administration regulation numbers are included on the document uploaded, please and thank you. So that we did have some discussion in regards to policy 2.150 where it relates to committees, and it was a question in regards to committee chairs adding to the agenda. And we can update the verbiage in that any recommendations for the committee chairs can definitely add to the agenda, but communicate with the board president at the time that agenda item is added. And we'll get that updated. Policy 2.160 is based on the school attorney, so we don't know every policy verbatim. So I depend heavily on Lori Holtley and given directives where there may be any legal questions and where it relates to board members. I have already expressed my concern about bidding, but on policy 2.170, there is a administrative regulation attached. And I just want clarification. These procedures on the administrative regulation, these procedures describe how the district will procure architectural engineering and land surveying services. Mr. Phillips, if you could give a little more information on land surveying. I'm only asking because I notice, so we have bids go out and then the company is chosen. We choose by bid or whatever other determining factors. And then I notice we sometimes have quite a few change orders. So if there's anything that could be a part of a change order that can be included, say for instance, they discover something is wrong with the soil. If we know that if there's a pattern of change orders for common things, if we can include that in the bid, then we can decrease on the amount of change orders, unless there's something that's being missed that you can elaborate on.
No, Board President Pearson, as it pertains to the professional services and land surveyors, that's typically our civil engineers that we do go through a process called a request for qualifications and advertise that. And we do that with our architects, engineers, whether that's mechanical, electrical, and plumbing and or civil engineering services. Okay. As it pertains to bids and specifically site logistics bids where we're doing things with parking lots or any below grade work, whether that's cement removal, footings and foundations, we typically do carry an allowance as part of the bid process just because of those situations. Unfortunately, even with soil boring testings that we do ahead of time, they're just times where you run into unforeseen conditions that exceed even the allowance that we put into the bid. So we do try to address as much of the unknown as possible within our bids, but that is the other reason we carry a contingency to really address some of those unforeseens that may not get caught within the engineering and design process.
Very good, thank you. Policy 2.172, use of consultants. This is where that $35,000 limit for board approval. And so I'm looking at whether it is from this January to December or a 12-month time frame period.
That would be the fiscal year timeframe, so it's July 1 through June 30th,
okay.
Aggregate of 35,000.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So board policy 2.220 speaks to the order of board meetings, and I would ask board members to kind of flag that and take a look at it, and if you have any questions to reach out to me. Board Policy 2.250, access to district public records. And any board members have any questions with that? And the FOIA officer, just to be clear, goes through who? Our legal department?
Yes,
We can,
requests for documents can be submitted to almost any staff member in the district, and we treat them as a FOIA request. So if there's a request for information that's sent to Dr. Reed, for example, the expectation would be that he forwards it to the legal department to treat it as a FOIA request if it's for anything other than confidential student record information, which we handle differently.
thank you. And policy 2.100 on Title IX sexual harassment grievance procedure. I would like, when we can have a conversation at another time in regards to the sexual harassment. We didn't get into that in the student code of conduct. I know that we're dealing with children versus adults, but the standard in and of itself, I think we need to have more discussion about. Are there any questions regarding any other policies? Ms. Bennett?
Yes, one follow-up from actually something that you just stated about sexual harassment. That was one thing, Mr. Carpenter, I did ask regarding code of conduct when it was revised, and sexual harassment now is a higher level than it was last year, just as a FYI.
Very good.
My question is about Board Policy 2.210, Organizational Board of Education Meetings. So given that this coming up very soon is the first time that this will have happened during my tenure, I'm just wondering when the Organization Board of Education meeting would be scheduled, kind of how that works, if anybody could provide information.
So it's normally the first Tuesday after the election, correct? Are you certification of the election?
So the second meeting that we already have scheduled for the month of April? Okay. So the committee of the whole? But then in here it says, but within 48 days after the election, which would mean that that's significantly past the 28 days. So it says, shall establish a date from the organizational meeting to be held on the first Tuesday following receipt of the consolidated election canvass from the election authority, but within 28 days after the election, which would have to be in the month of April, not in the month of May.
I think if we have it on April 29th, that would comply with all of it. We'll have the canvas, and that would be within 28 days of the April 1st election.
So have a third meeting in the month of April?
Yes, an organizational meeting.
Okay.
We would get that scheduled. And the authorities, meaning because we have both the election officer and the county, so all of that has to come in. It has to be certified before we can move forward. So we can determine a date to do that.
Okay, sounds good.
Any other questions? Yes.
I was just going to, on that exhibit that you pointed out regarding the code of conduct for board members, that exhibits the code of conduct from the IASB for board members. So I guess it's not really referenced in the policy, but the exhibit is the actual code from the IASB. So I don't.
Well, so again, I think, so we utilize IASB for information, but we establish our board board policies as long as we don't violate state statute. Did you?
Yeah,
So what number are you referring to again? I'm sorry.
2.80.
Yeah, mm-hmm.
And so that exhibit that you were wondering where it came from, or I don't know what, I guess I thought your question was that it wasn't that it wasn't.
No, I don't have a problem with the exhibit. I said that we could update the wording of the exhibit. And I understand what you're saying, that IASB made reference to that. But we also have other policies. We want to stay consistent with other policies where it relates to the board and the superintendent's relationship, if I'm understanding you correctly.
Sure. So are you suggesting that should be changed, or?
I'm suggesting that it should be consistent with the administration recommendation. The wording is what I'm suggesting.
Okay, thanks.
Sure. Any other questions? Do we have any? I didn't receive any speakers. Okay. Are there any board agenda recommendations or topics? Yes, Ms. Bennett.
I know last month Mr. Carpenter brought it up, and I think several of us also concurred about a policy regarding immigration and having that separate in addition to the law enforcement policy. Okay, is that still something that is being worked on or will be a future meeting?
So we did have legal discuss that, because we did make a suggestion and recommended that we establish an actual policy. Is that in the works? And we get an update on that?
It was my understanding that Attorney Holy was going to discuss it further with the board, or maybe the board was going to discuss it further and give us
we'll
some
follow up.
direction.
We'll follow up on that.
And then my last question is about any follow-up from the intergovernmental agreement with the 17th Judicial Circuit Courts that we talked about last month and the month before too.
In regards to our student records?
Yes.
Go ahead.
There's no longer a need to move forward with any intergovernmental agreement. They will provide consent signed by the parents consistent with state and federal law, and we will provide a kind of summary report with no access to district platforms being required.
So I know that part, but I mean follow-up regarding kind of how they were able to have access for as long as they did and kind of all the steps leading up to the intergovernmental agreement. We brought it up at last meeting if we wanted more information of kind of how long this had happened before we were made aware of it. Does anybody remember what I'm talking about? No? Okay.
I remember exactly what you're talking about. And Mr. Bartell, remember I had asked for a report? And I don't see that he's here tonight, but we can follow up with him and make sure that that report is done. And Lori had previously indicated that it was decades, but if I'm understanding you correctly, and many of us want to know, still, if it was 10 years ago or 15 years ago, well, like why? And there is, in the group of our policy indicates that, and we can go back to confirm it because I don't want to put something on the superintendent that is not accurate, so we can confirm. But the superintendent, there was one of the policies that indicated the superintendent being able to give permission or something to that effect in regards to student records. I'll find it. It made something to that reference. You can double check. Ms. Holy, were you going to say something? Maybe it's on the public record one.
I was just going to add, Mr. Barthel had, his team indicated it had been going on since about 2001, and I think the access, just because it was approved way back then, it just continued.
Okay, approved by who though?
We don't know because it started at least by 2001 is one of his team members recall it starting way back then. So I'm assuming it was probably somebody in IT and whoever was over or working with the probation officers. I just don't know though.
Okay. Well, Mr. Partel can give us an update when he returns. Are there any, Mrs. Haley? Ms. Haley, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to know, will we be discussing item 9 at all?
Yes, one moment, please. Do anyone have any questions regarding the governance consent items?
I do have a question for 9.
Yeah.
The intergovernmental agreement for the new property tax refund. And my question is, how is this different from the levy?
How is the property tax refund different from the levy? I believe it has something to do with the building, the new properties?
Yeah, this actually wouldn't affect our levy at all. This is actually a refund back to property owners of newly constructed homes. So this would fall outside of the levy.
Okay, and it also states in there that at some point we'll see a net long-term gain where new revenue is created, although we won't see that right away.
Correct.
So can you just kind of walk me through a scenario where, how will we see a gain?
Sure. So if you look at the chart, you can see what we potentially would rebate back over a 3-year period of time. And it's just, for round numbers, just call it roughly $350,000 a year. So what'll happen is when we are able to levy a tax.
What the chart that you're referring to in the third item, the P-tax rebate estimates?
Correct.
Okay.
Right. So if you look there, you can see over on the right-hand side where it says taxing districts. Kind of the bottom section right there. I know the print's really, really small there, but it's got city, District 205, year 1, year 2, year 3. You see what I'm talking about? So you can see roughly $350,000 a year. So what had happened is we would go ahead and levy the tax on that new property, and they could request a refund of that tax. So for us in the year, we would collect it. We potentially would rebate it back, and it would be a wash in those first 3 years. And then after that, we would collect the tax and we would no longer rebate it back. So that's the net gain after a period of time. And again, this is all on new construction, not existing homes. So it's a way to incentivize people to actually add property to the tax rolls that we would get in perpetuity after this 3-year period's over.
For that under the 3-year rebate program, that first number, are those estimates?
Those are estimates based on the assessed value. If you see over to the left, where you can see the yellow highlight, the number of single-family homes, two-family homes, and multifamily homes there that were constructed, that's roughly what the assessed value is going to be on those new homes when they come on the tax rolls. And so the dollar estimate that you see over on the right-hand side is that assessed value of, roughly $6 million, $6.5 million, times our tax rate up above there of 5.1954. And so that gives you the roughly $350,000 in year 1.
Thank you.
Yep.
Mr. Carpenter?
Do you know how much was rebated already on that program?
Nothing yet.
Okay.
Yeah, because they'll actually come on the tax rolls. They'll start to come on this year. So we may not even rebate much of anything this next year because a lot of these had the building permits pulled, but they weren't even constructed yet.
Okay,
So-
and is there any limit on the number of properties that would be eligible for this?
There was not a limit that we placed on that.
Okay.
Yep.
And it doesn't, and there's no limit on the value of the property either, is that correct? Okay,
Yep. Yeah, we'd like a bunch of $1 million homes, but I'm not sure we're going to get those.
Did you have any additional question? For the sake of public knowledge, so the district, and the city of Rockford and other local taxing bodies propose to extend the property tax refund program designed to provide a second 3-year property tax refund for buyers of newly built homes in the city of Rockford. The refund program is designed to encourage new residential property development in the city of Rockford, which would help stabilize neighborhoods, invigorate the local housing market, and ultimately increase the total assessed value, TAV, or TAV, of the property in the city of Rockford. While the initial financial impact of the refund program on the district's negative in so much as tax revenues are returned, the program should yield a net long-term gain as a new revenue would be created as a result of the program that would otherwise not be created. So the purpose of this agreement is to continue a system to residential real property tax refunds for purchasers of certain owner-occupied, newly constructed single-family residential real estate and multifamily residential real estate within the boundaries of the city. The new residential construction property tax refund program. And this additional background information in the summary. Is there any other questions?
Sorry, I did have one more. Is it multifamily, is there any limit on this number of families in the, or like is an apartment building eligible for this?
It would be, correct.
And a joint refund oversight committee shall review procedures for refunds and assess the effectiveness of the program as an incentive for the growth in new construction of single-family and multifamily residential real estate and preparation of reports regarding the refund system operation, effectiveness, and statistical information. Are there any other questions or concerns? If not, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you and have a good night.